Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Get Out of Rap. I have a feeling this might become a yearly thing, but I am very, very lucky to be joined by Stephen Yap of the CCMA, and we're going to be talking about something we talked about pretty much a year ago, last year, to the day, and that is the research that you've completed, Stephen, on voice of the contact center consumer. It's fascinating last time. I'm really looking forward to this, but thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Martin. It's great to be back.
And we're same room, same research, but I imagine some really interesting differences.
Same room, same research in terms of the themes and the coverage, but another year on and another year of huge changes. Don't need to tell you, Martin, everything that's happened in the world in the last 12 months, and we've seen the impact on consumer perceptions of customer contact, and it's been really interesting to see how things have moved on in the last 12 months.
And when you so Odigo said, let's do this again. You're with the CCMA. When you sat down and thought, I'm doing this, we're doing it again. Was there anything that you thought? What were the things like that kind of start, stop, continue?
Yeah.
Did you go through a little process like that?
Yeah, absolutely. So with any research like this, which is, you could describe it as a tracking study, it tracks how things change over time. And actually, this is the fourth time we've done it with Odigo. The first iteration, it wasn't called Voice of Contact Center Consumer back then, but the first time we actually did what then became Voice of Contact Center Consumer was in 2020. And we did it twice in 21 and then last year. And so this is the fourth iteration of the research. So we have been able to track this now over four waves, four iterations. And every time you've got to make some decisions. What do we keep in? What are the core elements of the research that remain in the research so that we can see how they move over time? That includes things like how do consumers feel overall about customer service. Another really core part of the research will always be a part of this research is the channel piece. And actually, we've kept it fairly simple insofar as we want to understand whether self-serve is becoming normalized. So the extent to which people are willing to self-serve for different journeys. And really interestingly, and we'll get to this today for sure, is how that's changed over the last 12 months. But there's also always the opportunity to put some new stuff in. One of the questions, and thank you to Melissa Cowdery from Odigo, whose idea it was to do this, but we've always looked at perceptions of customer service overall, but this year we've decided to also introduce a question in the survey around what people think of contact experiences specifically. And quite interesting again to see those results. So I think every time we do this, every year now, because I believe it will be a yearly study, every time we do this, there will be probably 70 to 80% of the tracking, and we'll see how things have moved over time, but then we'll always leave room for some new content.
I love that. And when you think about it, I'm sure people might disagree, but that time period that you have covered and done this has been one of great change, volatility, probably more so than the preceding, say, 5 years or even 10 years, that there is something very different around where we are now. What was interesting there was the perception of contact, right? What does that mean?
Well, the question, and I'll share the results later on in our discussion, Martin, the question specifically was, do you think that advisors working in contact centers have become more helpful, less helpful, or about the same as they were 12 months ago? So one of the things that I do as a researcher is try to figure out the best way to ask questions. And we've always asked a question about customer service, but that's quite a broad church. The question that we've asked since 2020 is, generally speaking, would you say customer service is better today compared with 12 months ago? Is worse compared with 12 months ago, or is about the same? compared with 12 months ago. So that's customer service, and customer service means a lot of things. So this year we decided to narrow it down a bit, and I remember having the brainstorm with Melissa, and we wanted to look at specifically perceptions of customer contact and contact centers. But how do you ask that question? The average person may not understand what a contact center specifically is. If you just say, how do you feel that contact centers have got better or worse? People might not understand that, and you can't ask ambiguous questions in surveys. It's got to be a question that everybody can understand. So we decided to ask it in that way. When you think about content, the longer version, and it was quite a long version because we wanted to be really clear and unambiguous, is when you make contact with an organization, when you think about the people who answer your calls, would you say that those advisors working in contact centers have become more helpful, less helpful than 12 months ago, or about the same? And so that enables us to specifically measure the perception or survey the perception, if you like, of helpfulness, which I think is a good proxy, if you like, for the contact experience.
And that is that something new then for us to start thinking about?
It is.
And that's fascinating. And that's something that's born out of your the research, and like you say, you're thinking about, okay, what can we do that's different? Is it difficult not to kind of focus in on that and go, oh, I just want to do the new thing? Or you just is it trending the bit that
it's actually the comparison between the perception of overall customer service versus the perception of customer contact experiences. That's interesting. And we'll absolutely spend some time talking about that, because when you compare perceptions of overall customer service versus perceptions of the contact experience, the results are a bit different. And the interesting story is in the differences.
I'm intrigued, mate. Is that a good place to start? Or well, it's your research. Where is the best place to? Where's the best place to start?
Well, let me. What is that old song? Let me take you on a journey through sound. Do you know that one? That's what I feel like I'm doing.
Isn't that
Pump
Mars?
up the volume.
Pump up the volume.
Pump up the volume. You and I showing our vintage 87.
Yes, nothing wrong with that.
87. Yeah, and very nice. So let me take you through a journey through research, he said, trying not to cringe. I think it's good. It's good to go on that journey, because I think the way that I like to tell the story is to build on each step. And I think the best place to start is to look at overall customer service, which is what we've been doing since 2020. So the question is, to 2,000 people across the UK, and we always control for age, gender, and region so that it's a good snapshot of the adult population, the 18 plus population in the UK. So we can feel pretty comfortable that this represents the UK. So the starting point is, how do people feel about the direction of customer service? So would you say that customer service is getting better, getting worse, or is about the same as it was 12 months ago? Now, if we rewind to 12 months ago, when we were having this call, I was talking about how you can pretty much divide up the UK population into 3 chunks. And those 3 chunks are about equal size. So you got about a third of people who think that customer service hasn't really got better or worse, it's about the same. You got another third of people who think the customer service is getting better or had got better. And you've got another third of people who think that customer service has got worse. So a third approximately. If you now fast forward to today, 2023, perceptions have changed. And now what we're seeing is the proportion of people who think the customer service has got worse from 22 to 23 is almost double the proportion of people who thought it's getting better. So the specific numbers are 34% of people in the UK think that customer service has got worse in the year to 23. 18% of people feel that customer service has got better. So overall, perceptions are moving in the wrong direction. More and more people are feeling that customer service is moving in the wrong direction. And I'll go on to explain some of the reasons why I think that's happening. But I think that's really worth noting, and it's a big wake-up call. It's a big call to action, call to arms for all of us. And of course, customer contact is a subset of the wider customer service, customer experience sector. But certainly what this tells us is, rightly or wrongly, or should I say, despite our best efforts, there's a gap emerging. The gap's getting bigger. The gap in terms of our customers' expectations and our ability to meet and deliver against those expectations is only getting bigger.
Wow, you're right. It is a wake up call. Even just hearing you say it, it gave me a feeling a little bit like of when I had to phone up for my GCSEs, and I'd worked so hard, and the very first one I got was an E, and I felt really deflated. And that's, I think, the feeling I've got right now is that, we're working so hard in our industry. You get that, and perception is king, right? Because that's what our consumers, the people we're here to serve, are feeling. That is a wake up call for sure, for sure. And why is it happening then?
Well, I wouldn't blame you. First of all, I wouldn't blame you for feeling that way, and I'm sure a lot of us would react in that way. It is
but
a
we
feeling
dust
of
ourselves down.
Of course we do. Of course we do.
Mm.
So I think that we have to recognize that any survey result, and any result like this that shows that perceptions are declining, or that perceptions are that customer service is going in the wrong direction overall, are first and foremost a function of people's expectations. And if you think about expectations, think about what's happened in the world. And you made a reference to us having done this research through a period of intense change. Of course, yes, absolutely. No one needs reminding of all the changes that happened between 20 and 22. And in the last 12 months, we've come out of a global pandemic, but we're now in a period of huge inflation. Look what's happened to energy prices, food prices, mortgage rates. None of us, I think, are unaffected by what's going on in the world. There's war on the eastern borders of Europe. There's an awful lot happening in the world, and when you have an environment of change, of economic headwinds, of increased or certainly sustained uncertainty, I think that period of uncertainty that we all lived through during the pandemic has been sustained. None of us really had time to recover and reset ourselves since the pandemic. That feeling of uncertainty, of loss of control, is still there. It's still there, and it's just manifesting itself in slightly different ways now, and perhaps even more tangible ways, where we've gone from worrying about our health to worrying about our finances. And in that environment, what we started to see during the pandemic, which is a greater reliance on organizations to help, a greater focus on customer contact, and particularly if you work in sectors such as utilities, government, healthcare, for example, all of those sectors have seen a massive uptick in demand because their customers have been turning to them and are turning to them for support and for help. Whether it's looking at my payment plans, and I need to adjust my payments to you. I need to adjust my monthly payments. I need to defer a payment. I need to change my payment amount, or I need to make a change to my contract. In an environment of uncertainty, of worry, customers are turning to organizations. It's driving demand, and it's also increasing the amount of stress and emotion within customer contact. There's more at stake than ever before. Making that change to your payment plan may be the difference between you making ends meet this month and versus not. There's just so much more riding on it. And so, coming back to expectations, I think what we're seeing is expectations are through the roof, are accelerating, and that's without even mentioning all the stuff that we always talk about, which is digitization and the Amazonification, as we call it. All of that is still going on as well. But I think what we're seeing first and foremost in those results is rising expectations.
And how? Well, I guess we can get into that. But what else then are you seeing when it comes to specifically that change? Because that, would you say from a researcher's point of view, that's significant?
Totally. If you mean in a statistical sense, it is absolutely significant. So we can take it down a layer and look at some other themes that we uncovered in the research. So we can look at it by sector. And perhaps not surprisingly, when you ask the question, would you say customer service has got better or worse by industry, by sector? The sectors where you see the greatest level of negativity, things that got worse, are utilities, government, and we're talking today, you and I, Martin, on a train strike day. Unfortunately, trains and bus services also see a lot of high scores for things are getting worse. So it's transport, it's utilities, it's government, it's now, and coming back to the, if you like, the dusting ourselves off and perhaps that moment of frustration, it's important to recognize that some of this, if not all of it, is not within the contact center's control. This reflects the wider environment. It's not the contact center's fault that there are train strikes. No, there are a lot of reasons why there are train strikes. What's going on in utilities with the rates that we're seeing today is not in any way the responsibility of the contact center. But the reality is that's, the customers feel it, the customers experience it, and that's affecting wider perceptions of customer service. And that's let alone government. The most negative perceptions of customer service declines are in government. And I think it's fair to say that perhaps there are people who perhaps would not have historically made contact with their local council or government, but have needed to in the last 12 months because of rising cost of living. They've needed help. People who've always managed to get by without needing help or calling into the contact center, their local council have done so in the last 12 months. And for whatever reason, they haven't had a great experience, or they haven't had their issues resolved, and that's left them feeling that it's hasn't been a good experience for them. So that's one level. So I think that comes back to the idea that customer service is a lot of things. It's not just customer contact. If you work in insurance, if you work in the automotive industry, if you work in consumer electronics, actually getting repairs continues to be really hard. That started during the pandemic because of challenges with supply chains. There's still shortages of essential materials, parts, chips. And if you work in a sector, or if you're a customer of a sector that relies on those parts, it's taking longer to get your car repaired or your TV repaired than before. And that's also going to have an impact on people's perceptions of service, even though it's not about customer contact. So what's going on in the wider world, I think we're seeing, but there's one really important piece that I want to add to this to help explain what's going on with perceptions of customer service. We talked at some length last year, Martin, about the impact of technology orientation. As what I mean by that is the way you feel about customer service and customer contact is to a large extent determined by how much of an earlier adopter you are of tech. So if you are somebody who embraces apps, embraces digitization, you're very comfortable with it, you enjoy using it, you are more likely to think that customer service is going in the right direction. And the research bears that out. So we can show in the research that people who consider themselves earlier adopters have a much more positive view generally than people who don't. It also correlates to age, which is something that we've seen over the years and we talked about last year. So typically younger people are more likely to think that customer service is getting better, and more mature people are more likely to think that customer service is getting worse. And part of that is because of the relationship between age and early adoption. So that is something that continues. It's not new. We've seen it before, but that's not the only thing that's going on. What we can see is people, we added a question this year. Would you, to what extent would you say that it is easier or harder to manage your finances compared with 12 months ago? The first thing to share here is that a lot of people are struggling with that, manage their finances. So the question is it easier? Is it harder? 53% of people, so that's more than half of those surveys, and more than half of the people in the UK are finding it harder to manage their finances compared with 12 months ago. So that's a data point to illustrate the widespread impact of cost of living, rising cost of living,
Mm.
rising inflation. It has a huge impact. 53% of people are putting their hands up and saying it's harder now to manage my finances. If you cut the survey results according to the 53% who say it's harder to manage my finances versus the 47% who say it's not harder, if you look at customer service perceptions across those two groups of people, there's a massive difference. And you can see the specifics and the data in the research report. But those who say it is harder to manage my finances are much more likely to think that customer service is getting worse. So there is a link between
Yeah.
financial challenge, financial constraint, and your perception of customer service. And for me, that really underscores what's going on in the world and the impact it's having in our specific world of customer contact. We are now in this environment where a vast number of people are finding it harder and harder to manage their money, make ends meet. And in that environment, people need help. They're turning to their providers for help. And as fast as we can provide that help, the expectations are rising even faster still.
It's fascinating. And I think there's going to be people listening. And when you were talking then about that kind of, if I'm coming to make a call and I'm in an emotive state or I'm worried, and I, like you said earlier, I'm thinking, dependent on the result of this call is going to have a big impact on just my life, then I'm super sensitive to anything that is going to trigger me to say I'm annoyed or this isn't a good service or any of those things. I was also really fascinated by something you said earlier. Do you think some of the results then have been, or there's been an impact of people that are making contact for the first time? So they're, as well as the early adopter population, as well as the financial security situation, let's say, are there also a group of first-time contactors who, if you're contacting regularly, you will have a different perception than somebody who's having to ring their energy provider or whoever for the first time?
I think there is. I can't quantify that, but I have some anecdotal evidence. There are quotes in the research report from government, from local councils who have told me about the influx of people who are contacting for the first time, and perhaps their experience of shall we say that their local council is for whatever reason, rightly or wrongly, not up to their expectation. There is another element to that. It's not exactly what you asked, Martin, but I think it's related to what you asked, which I want to come to as well, which I think is also really key here. I think what we're seeing is, and this is something again that we started to see last year, and it is very much on the radar in 2023, is that for those really intensive, high value, high emotion types of journeys, those complex journeys, like when you want to sort out your warranty, or you need to get a repair done, or you need to get a refund sorted, or you've got a question, your bill doesn't look right. You've got a question about your bill. Your bill's too high. Why is my bill this much? Remembering that it's so much more important than it has been ever to sort out your bill, because many of us are struggling to make ends meet and to get through week on week and month on month. So it's just more riding on it now. We're more likely to want to talk to a human actually than we ever before. So for the first couple of years, we've been doing voice of the contact center. And when we look at the preference for self-serve, or should I say the acceptance of self-serve. So the specific question is, would you be happy to self-serve, or would you prefer to be assisted by a human? And we look at that across a number of different journeys, ranging from really quite simple journeys like opening an account to more complex ones like refund and invoice query, bill queries. And what we saw across the first couple of waves was that actually people were becoming more accepting across all the journey types of self-serve, and that coincided with the pandemic, and a lot of providers were introducing self-serve
Yeah.
capabilities. So I think what we saw there was consumers getting to grips with things and being quite open and being quite accepting. What we started to see last year and further this year is actually things have gone the other way. We've sort of gone 180 degrees. And for those more complex journeys, people are showing less acceptance of self-serve and more of an expectation that they will talk to a human. And I think this is also a driver of negative perceptions of customer service, is that because a lot of providers, I think it's fair to say, are trying to encourage the adoption of self-serve. But actually, in that environment, in this environment, we know that people more than ever want to talk to humans. And I think what we're seeing is a certain amount of frustration in, I've tried the self-serve journey. I've been unable to complete the self-serve journey. I couldn't get what I needed through the self-serve journey. I've then had to turn to talk to a human, and I'm already slightly frustrated at that point because I've tried the self-serve, it didn't
Yeah.
work. So, but you forced me to pick up the phone. And at that point, even when at the point you answer the call, I'm already slightly irate. I think people have become quite wise now after 3-4 years on from when the push to self-serve really started to happen. I think as consumers, we've become pretty savvy now. We know where self-serve works and where it doesn't, and we know that self-serve doesn't work in all situations. And we now understand that if we really need to get something sorted, it may be better just to go straight to the phones or the live chat.
Definitely. I think that's true of, I know the distinction between chatbot and digital assistant, but if you just think about how I'm hearing a lot of people are saying, that one of the first interactions from consumers is, I want to talk to an agent, before they've even tried to be funneled into a particular way. It's just, no, yeah, I'm only here because I have to be. I want to go over here. And it's fascinating that you say around, if you think about the pandemic, and the word I think you used was openness, because we, through necessity, had to open our minds to how we engaged with the world around us, how we engage with retail, how we engage with travel. And there was some real kind of circuit breaker type activity taking place where, no, this is how you shop now. So we were far more open. Do you think, as well as that savviness and something around that you said earlier about our expectations as consumers have risen, and when you factor all of these things in, I guess it's not a surprise to see those first results that you mentioned?
100%. All of those things are at play here. We've become more savvy, more wise as consumers. We understand what the limitations of digital channels. And there's very low tolerance now for when organizations try to push us to those digital channels and make it hard for us to engage with a live advisor. So if anybody is still trying to deflect and push and make it hard by burying the phone number, you've got to revisit that strategy, because it's just frustrating consumers. But also, there's more riding on getting my query resolved than there was before. It could make the difference between me getting through this month and not getting through this month. And really importantly as well, think about your people, think about your colleagues on the front line, think about what it's doing to them if you are poorly deflecting demand, if you do have broken self-serve journeys and you're forcing people on those journeys, your customers on those journeys, which don't then work, you're making it hard for them to reach a live advisor, and they finally do. And what are they going to do? They're going to take it out on your advisor. So I think what we're seeing is the learning for 2023 after 3 to 4 years of this is self-serve works in certain circumstances. I'm in no way saying that we shouldn't continue to develop our self-serve capabilities, but that the limitations have become clear, and we're
Mm.
seeing those limitations manifest in customer perceptions, but also, as I'll come to in a moment, the impact on the front line.
Mm. Yeah, and I think you know, you talked before with on a panel around that kind of the cognitive load is there already for our customer facing team members,
Yeah,
and if then how the state by which the customer is delivered to them
yeah,
is already they're wrought, you're kind of in a damage limitation mode from the word go, and
yeah, yeah,
that's hard work.
yeah. We added a question. So part of the new content this year was the question is, have you ever become angry or upset when
Mm,
interacting with a contact center advisor in the past 12 months?
wow.
And I'll just pause for a moment. The proportion of people who said yes, be really interesting. Have a guess. Have a guess. How many people would you say in the survey said, "Yep, I've become angry at least once"?
In the last 12 months,
Yeah,
I'm going to say 50%.
53,
Wow. I was
53,
going high as well.
53, 53.
Wow.
53. And in fact, the question answer responses extended into yes once, yes a few times, yes many times. There's a lot of emotion out there, and as you say, the state in which customers are delivered to the front line tends to be quite wrought, and
Mm,
that is a function of, in some cases, poor self-serve experiences, but it's a function of the world. It's a
mm,
function of the world in which we're in,
mm,
when people need to get their problem solved, and
mm.
there is just less tolerance and less patience in the world. Emma Dark of Estee Lauder has a phrase which always has always stuck in my mind. She talks about the post-pandemic hangover, and I think that's a
Yeah.
really good way to describe the world of, the culture in which we live. We're still in that hangover, which has wrought an environment of limited tolerance, limited patience, and even customers who, um, and it's human nature. It's human nature when you're up against it and you're struggling to just have, to take it out on the person on the other end of
Mm,
the phone. At the,
mm.
in extremities, that can manifest itself, as we all know, in abuse. Um, but I think what we're seeing is this. I think the word crisis is a fair word. Is there's a crisis of high stress, high emotion that is felt by the contact center frontline more than any other group of people,
Mm,
I think, in the world. And coming back to the panel that you and I were on, it's so important. It's always been important, but it's so important right now to think about how are you supporting and protecting your frontline in
mm,
this world of high stress, high emotion, where we're delivering irate customers. They're already irate by the time, they've got through, they are already
mm,
irate.
mm. Were there I mean, look, I completely applaud and back everything you're saying, because you can't. It's interesting, isn't it? Because you can't look at consumer behavior and how we can deliver for consumers without looking at the people that are doing it and saying, how are they? Are we supporting them? Does the journey help them as much as it helps the consumer? Because if the two are not aligned, then there's always going to be this discord.
Completely. This has been a mantra it's been around for a while. The alignment of customer and colleague experience, but never more has that been important than today.
Mm,
Um, and when we're seeing this epidemic, this crisis of stress and intolerance and impatience coming through more than ever, how do we empower our people to be more resilient, but actually get the job done as well? So what
mm,
tools are we giving them to solve customers' problems? How are we enabling? How are we taking away some of that complexity and cognitive load through better, more integrated, more intuitive systems? What is interesting, and just want another data point, and coming back to where we started the conversation, we did add the question, how would you rate the helpfulness of contact center advisors? So this is the new topic, if you like. So we've talked a lot about customer service, and we can see over time, particularly from 22 to 23, there was a huge jump in the wrong direction, where a lot of consumers are now feeling that customer service is going in the wrong direction, is getting worse. We can't track it next year when we to have this conversation, Martin. I'll be able to tell you how perceptions of contact center advisor helpfulness has changed over the next 12 months. But what I can show you is that perceptions of contact center helpfulness, if you like, the advisors, are on the whole much more positive than of customer service overall. If you put them side by side, and we've done exactly that in the report. If you look at how people rate the helpfulness of advisors versus customer service overall, actually helpfulness and advisors are rated a lot more positively than customer service. And that's been validated in conversations I've had with contact centers, where a lot of contact centers, a lot of organizations will measure the contact experience, the satisfaction with your call today. Some call it the TNPS, the transactional NPS, but they also measure what some call the RMPS, the brand level. How would you rate the organization overall? And a number of contact centers have told me that generally the scores for the transactional experience, the contact experience, tend to be much higher overall than the brand rating, the overall organizational rating, which validates what we're seeing. So people tend to give higher scores to the contact experience than they do to the overall customer experience, which tells me a couple of things. It tells me that consumers can tell the difference between the contact experience and the customer experience, that they do not hold the contact center and the people in the contact center fully accountable for the experience, that consumers understand root causes, and that in a lot of cases, the person on the other end of the phone or the chat is doing the best they can, but they're limited in what they can do because the issue is outside of their immediate control. And consumers recognize that by and large. So I think that's quite encouraging. That's quite encouraging. But coming back to the challenges that many organizations are facing, those challenges are in the root causes. Those challenges are whether it's supply chains in automotive, whether it's massive increases in demand for repairs, if you're in local housing. A lot of the problems that customers are contacting us to solve are root cause problems that organizations find it very difficult to sort. And that's what we're seeing is actually, I think we're seeing an escalation in problems with root causes. And what that tells me, again, is that more than ever, when there are more and more problems with root causes that are causing problems for customers, when there's more at stake in solving those problems than ever before for the customers, we've got to look after our people, because our people are in the middle. They're caught in the middle, in the contact center. They're doing their best to solve problems, but they can't solve the problems because the problems lie outside, and they're caught in the middle. The customers are calling in. Our people are trying their best to help. The customers recognizing they're trying their best to help, but they're still going to be irate. They're still going to take it out because that's human nature.
And you can see that, can't you, in just the two things that you shared then around 53% said they've been angry, yet people will also recognize that the person they're speaking to has been helpful.
Yeah.
And it is that disassociation from, it's not you, but I'm annoyed with the brand and another experience and like you say, the root cause. You've been very helpful, but you are still going to get it with both barrels right now.
I wonder how many people listening to this, I'm sure everybody listening to this works in the contact industry in some shape or form. I wonder how many of us are in that 53% who've become angry. My guess is probably quite a few. And yet we are the ones you'd think who have the most empathy with the advisor. And yet we ourselves can't help but but express the emotion, because frustration with long unsolved problems, frustration with poor journeys. It is human nature to be frustrated when you want to solve a problem and the problem cannot be solved, or the journey to solving that problem is below your expectation. It's human nature to express that to the human who's trying their best, unfortunately. And more than ever, enabling that human, enabling that advisor with all the tools that at our disposal, but also the right support, the right pastoral care, is so key.
Someone heading a contact center, or director of contact center, or customer experience, reading your report, what do you hope their key takeaways are that lead to actions?
Great question. Firstly, think about your front line. Think about the wider world of the post-pandemic hangover, of the stress, the emotion, the need and the urgency for resolution that customers have, and think about the impact that has on our front line, and what you can do to support your front line in those circumstances by giving them the equipment and the culture and the support. But furthermore, what can we do to engage with and influence the wider organization and address those root causes? This is not new, and this will always be an ongoing, recurring topic within the world of contact centers. We see and we understand what the customers are going through better than anybody else. And yet there's often a feeling of a disconnect between us and the rest of the organization. How can we, and this is to protect the front line, but it's actually to ultimately to better serve customers. How can we continue to, or better connect with other, the rest of the organizations, the product teams, the journey teams, the transformation teams, to address those root causes better? I know a lot of organizations are experiencing themselves, financial constraint. A lot of organizations are looking at tightening their belts, and yet it's very hard to square that in an environment where customers need our help more than ever before. Our front line is feeling more pressure than ever before. There's more anger and emotion coming into the front line than ever before. And if you're looking at tightening your belt and making cuts in that environment, you have to be really, really cautious and clever about how you do that, because the impact will be immediate. If we don't do it in an intelligent way, the impact will be immediate on our people and on our customers, because the bar is rising. At the same time as we're looking to potentially make some cuts, actually the needs and the expectations are on the up. If we were to try to match those needs and expectations, we wouldn't be cutting, we'd be investing. Now, it's easy for me to say, but the reality is our customers need us more than ever before, and our people need us. They need our investment and our attention more than ever before. So more than ever, I think it's so important to not think about customers and people as just resources and numbers. It is, I think, a tendency within our world to manage by numbers. We're a very quantitatively driven environment, and the world in which we're currently living is not just a quantitative world. It's a human world. It's a qualitative world. It's a world of emotion. It's a world of feeling. It's a world of stress. It's a world where resilience is incredibly needed, both in our own colleague population, but in the wider environment. And think about the long term as well. Think about the longer term, and think about how we can fulfill our social obligation and our duty to our customers and our people by delivering to them both the contact experiences that they deserve, but all the wider resolutions, the wider service that they deserve. And think about the benefits of, if you can do that, think about the benefits to your brand, to your organization in the longer term. It's so tempting for organizations in the short to decisions for a shorter term, and I understand why that is. I understand the pressures that exist and why organizations need to make decisions or feel like they need to make decisions in the short term. But this is not a short-term game we're playing. It's a long-term game we're playing, and more than ever, the role that we have to play as customer experience leaders, as contact center professionals, is one of social purpose. We are playing an incredibly important role in the world and for people, not just our people, but people, everybody, the population. Consumers need us more than ever.
That has given me goosebumps. You said it was a wake-up call at the outset, and you've just given us a rallying call there. And I love the phrase social purpose. We have only touched the surface of your research. Stephen, thanks so much for coming on and talking so eloquently and passionately about our industry and where we're at and what we need to do, because I'm right behind you. I really am. For people that want to dive into the report in detail, where can they get it?
It's a free download from ccma.org.uk. And just right back at you, Martin. I mean, I think if I were to think about somebody who really tries to give back and believes in the idea of purpose, it's you, for sure. I mean, what you're doing is all about giving back. It's all about purpose, and it's all about helping people in our industry deliver better to the people that we serve. So keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. And thanks so much for coming on. I know I'll see you soon in London, but we can pencil in this time next year to do exactly the same again.
For sure. See you again, same time, same place in about 12 months.
Thank you, mate.
Take care.